Hello and welcome to this week's edition of Retire Well, the show that's dedicated to helping you retire well in all areas of your life. I'm your host, Kristen Oakley, and here in the studio with me, we have Kevin Bucher. He is the co-founder and a financial advisor at Citizen Advisory Group. Kevin, it's always great to see you.
Yes.
Looking forward to today.
Yep, love getting on and talking about some of the different financial topics and sharing some information to hopefully help people retire well and have good, happy retirements.
Absolutely. Well, and today's conversation is not always necessarily the most fun one to have, but to your point, in order to help folks retire well, we need to talk about it. And we are going to be talking today about healthcare, specifically Medicare, as well as long-term care. And Kevin, it's really interesting. I've had the privilege of getting to know and work alongside several different financial advisors throughout my career. And the reality is a lot of financial advisors out there will not even have this conversation with their clients. They don't want to talk about it. And when I've asked them why not, you want to know what they say?
Well, I think there's probably two answers. Number one, it's hard. So I think we tend to not want to do things that are hard, but
Right.
the more telling answer is probably there's not enough money in it. So it's hard to do, it's not enough money in it, so it's just not worth a lot of advisors' time. And I think that's absolutely the wrong approach.
I do too, because you and I both know that in order to be fiduciaries, in order to serve clients' best interests, this is such a critical piece of someone's overall financial plan, and you can't afford not to talk about it.
Yeah, I think when you look at some of the major issues or concerns that someone has or some of the major decisions, there are oftentimes we find topics that advisors do hold off and try to stay out of. And those are things like helping people make the right Social Security claiming strategy so that they can get the best out of Social Security. It's helping people manage and mitigate their tax liability so that they're not overpaying in taxes. And then in this area of health insurance. And those are all things that can really erode your retirement savings. So financial advisors need to get in that game because we can really provide that guidance that people are looking for and really help them make the informed decisions around these topics.
Well, and there's so much in this area that, again, how you make a decision in one area could either positively or negatively impact the rest of your financial plan. And that's why I know that you're very passionate at Citizen Advisory Group about helping people look at all of this from that comprehensive, holistic financial planning point of view. So let's kick it off. I know we got to start with some of the basics, Medicare 101, if you will, right?
Yeah, such an exciting topic. Let's uncover some of the Medicare. And for a lot of people, the transition into Medicare and then evaluating all of the different Medicare plan options is just an overwhelming process because it just seems so confusing, all the different choices.
So it's like the alphabet soup of Medicare, we say, right?
And there's so much that they associate with letters. So you got the A's, B's, C's, and D's, and then there's also plans A through G, and there's all these different things. So it's just it's a challenging maze. There's all these pieces of the puzzle you have to get together. But yeah, let's kind of start by just doing a quick Medicare 101, so to speak.
Perfect,
so,
let's do it.
There's two parts to the original Medicare program. So Part A and Part B. Part A is the hospitalization side of Medicare. And when you were a worker and you were paying your FICA taxes, that was funding not just Social Security, but that was also funding your Medicare benefits, in particular the hospitalization for Part A. So as long as you have earned 40 credits of coverage, so that basically takes 10 years worth of work earnings, you're going to qualify for Medicare Part A benefits without having to pay an additional premium. Now, one little side note of that is that's for you or a spouse. So if you individually don't have your 40 credits, but your spouse does, you can still qualify for the Part A without having to pay that premium. So long story short, most people are not paying a premium for their Part A benefits.
Okay.
So that covers the hospitalization side.
Right.
That's not full coverage, so there's gaps in that. There's a deductible, there's lifetime maximum amounts that you can use for hospitalization coverage, but that's your hospitalization, Part A. And then you roll into Part B of Medicare. So Part B of Medicare is the medical side or the doctor side of Medicare. And that one does have a premium. So in 2024, we're looking at a premium of $174.70 per month for Medicare Part B. Typically, we do see an annual increase to that. So that is a price that's not fixed and stagnant. It's going to be affected by raising cost of insurance. So we have the Medicare Part B cost that we pay. and that covers then your hospital and doctor, but again, not full coverage.
Right.
So there's going to be deductibles associated with that, and then that's essentially an 80-20 plan.
Okay.
So that's what Medicare covers, and with those gaps, as we get older, an unfortunate reality is we tend to not necessarily get healthier.
Right.
So having health care is really important, and most individuals find that they're not comfortable with just the benefits that Medicare provides. So now we're looking at one of two distinctly different plan options, and that is the fundamental decision that you have as you're entering into Medicare is which one of these plan designs is going to be more to your liking. Do you prefer the Medicare supplement route or the Medicare Advantage route? And let's get into some of the
so this
differences
is really
there.
interesting because I think there is a lot of misconceptions out there that Medicare covers everything, but to your point, it does not. So talk about the difference between this Medicare supplement and Medicare Advantage and what folks need to understand.
All right, so with the Medicare supplement option, you're basically still enrolled in Medicare Part A and B. That is your primary insurer. So your expenses for medical are going to route through Medicare, and Medicare pays their portion. If you then purchase a Medicare supplement, it sets in the secondary position to Medicare, and it's going to fill in those gaps of coverage depending on which plan design you pick. So again, those are also letters, so that's where it might get a little confusing. So there's Part A and Part B, and then the Medicare supplements are plans, and those are also identified by letter. So depending on which plan you pick, you still may have a small deductible, but it's basically going to cover that 20% coinsurance for you. So it really reduces significantly the risk you have for out-of-pocket expenses.
Got it.
So kind of going back to why should a financial advisor be involved in the Medicare decision? Well, we kind of need to know what the exposure is you have for medical costs. So are you paying a high monthly premium and we need to account for that in the income plan? Or do you have a lower premium and you have high out-of-pocket exposure and we need to make sure there's adequate liquidity for these expenses that maybe come up that weren't expected?
Right.
So we need to understand what those coverages are so that your financial plan can be set up to accommodate that. So again, the Medicare supplement side, Medicare is still your primary. A supplemental plan is then purchased to fill in those gaps. That's not still full coverage because that doesn't include the prescription drug coverage. So now we have to add a Part D, a prescription drug plan, to get the coverage for the prescription side of things. So
Right.
there's
And if
actually
you
four
don't,
pieces.
There's a penalty, right, if you don't have the adequate coverage.
I mean, that's a really good point that Medicare A, B, and their prescription drug plan, all of that has enrollment windows. And if you are eligible to go into the Medicare program and you opt out of any one of those pieces and then later tried to get re-enrolled back in, you are subject to a penalty for that window of time that you weren't in the program when you were eligible.
Right.
And it is not a one-time penalty, Kristen. This is a penalty that follows you for the rest of your life. You pay that penalty every year for the rest of your life.
This is why it's so important to be able to work with someone who understands and who's on the front lines, who knows how all of this works so that you don't inadvertently make a bad decision that then could follow you for the rest of your life.
Yes. So then we still haven't got to the Medicare Advantage side.
I know,
so
we
let
have
me,
so much more to
yes.
cover.
So let me kind of just close this end out real quick here. So on the Medicare Advantage side, well, you're still in A and B because you still have to pay that premium, but Medicare is no longer going to set in the primary position for your care. A Medicare Advantage plan or Part C of Medicare is going to replace your Medicare benefits. It's administered through the private insurance company. Generally speaking, when you do that, you're going to have a much lower premium, but your out-of-pocket expenses will be higher. Your cost sharing and medical expenses will be higher. So different plan, that's also going to be a network-based plan, so I need to make sure my doctors and hospitals are in that plan. But that's the fundamental decision that you have to make. Am I one that's more attracted to paying a little bit higher premium with low out-of-pockets and no networks like the Medicare supplement option? Or am I okay with having some lower premiums but out-of-pocket exposure and living within the network on the Medicare Advantage? So we have to, that's the fundamental decision, and it's not an easy one, and we can help people navigate those choices and make the right choice for them.
So if someone's watching today and they're going, yes, I actually need help figuring all this out, figuring out what would be best for me, what would you say to that individual?
Well, we can help. So it's a big decision, and you do want to make sure you get it right. So you want to come in and meet with one of our advisors and look through these options and make the right choice for you. We can't help you through that until you pick up the phone and give us a call and schedule your complimentary consultation to do so.
Awesome. Kevin, thank you. And to our viewers at home, we are going to take a quick break, but we encourage you, this is a great opportunity for you to pick up the phone and receive some guidance for no cost, no charge, no obligation. We are inviting you to be able to come in and meet with the team of Citizen Advisory Group to receive your very own retirement checkpoint review. And if you are worried about healthcare, if you need help navigating this Medicare maze, the team would love to help and serve you. That number to call is there on the bottom of your screen, 866-630-1675. You're also welcome to take out your smartphone, and if you open up that camera app, you can point, click, and scan that QR code down in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. That will take you over to a landing page, ask you a few short, simple questions, and then a member of the team will reach out to connect with you to schedule your complimentary visit that way as well. When we come back, we need to dive into long-term care. Medicare does not cover long-term care, so how do you plan for this exorbitant expense in your retirement? Stay with us.
I have a bachelor's degree in education. I spent the first part of my working years teaching. I left the teaching world and went into a family business endeavor that eventually led me down to the financial services world. And there really is a lot of overlap between the two, taking comprehensive topics and breaking that into common sense, easy to understand framework, whether that was in the classroom or now in a meeting room with clients. It was a transition, but some of the skills from the education world transferred very well over into the financial world. By and large, people are very confused about the financial planning process, and oftentimes they kind of settle for the default outcome of that, of not really having control. One of my favorite parts of the process is putting the solutions together and then presenting that back to the client and seeing maybe some light bulbs going off to understanding things that maybe there wasn't a great understanding of before. Setting goals, working towards those goals, and helping them along this journey to having a more successful financial outcome. I do have an oversight role as well, where I'm overseeing other advisors. We work very well together in a collaboration where we bring different areas of knowledge and expertise to the table to really provide more comprehensive solutions for our clients.
Welcome back to Retire Well. I'm your host, Kristen Oakley, here with Kevin Bucher, co-founder and financial advisor at Citizen Advisory Group. We're having a really important conversation today about Medicare and long-term care. It's no secret that healthcare is one of the most major expenses that needs to be planned for in retirement. And Kevin, it's true, I think a lot of people are scared about living their money in retirement, and a lot of it's due to the unknown of some of the costs associated with what we're talking about today.
Yes, so it is a difficult conversation. It's a conversation that many don't like to have. But one of the consequences of this risk that I think we all understand is out there, that we might have an illness that affects our independence.
Right.
And it's a really costly time of life. So I think we see too often people that are so worried about this risk maybe manifesting in their situation that they are living this just in case retirement, and they're holding back some cash reserves in case this happens.
Right.
And really, there's a better way to approach it that will allow you to live and enjoy your life while still having some plans in place for when this happens. So I think that's really the key thing is we know that this risk is out there.
Right.
We can't just ignore it, which is what happens too often. We can't pretend it doesn't exist. So we have to have these difficult conversations around this topic. And we need to start setting up some plans for how we're going to handle this long-term risk that's out there, because Medicare is unfortunately not the solution.
Right.
So we talked in segment one a little bit about some of the things that Medicare covers and it doesn't cover, but Medicare does not cover a long-term illness where you need assistance in living with the activities of daily living. So Medicare does cover what would be called medically necessary things for recovery.
Okay.
And so if you're doing something that you are going to recover from medically, well, Medicare is likely going to cover
rehab, that kind of thing, right?
Yes.
Like if you fall, and that happened with my father-in-law. So
Yeah, but the statistics show that over time, it's not recoverable situations that we need help with. It's just the activities of daily living where we need assistance with these activities.
Right, which are, there's 7 of them, right?
Yeah, well, there's 6 activities of
total,
daily
okay.
living, and I have them written down in front of me, but let's try to do it without looking. I
Okay,
won't get through
yes.
all 6. So number 1 is bathing. So do you need assistance in bathing? Number 2, it would be eating. So can you make and successfully prepare and eat your meals without assistance? Can you transfer yourself? So can you get up and down and transfer yourself? Can you use the restroom without assistance? Can you hold going to the bathroom without using assistance? I don't know if we got to all 6. We probably didn't because I never get them all at once. Dressing is one.
Yes.
So there's
Grooming.
the 6 activities of daily living. And if we need assistance with that, well, Medicare is not going to cover that if we need assistance for what would be called custodial care. So we need to understand that, okay, how is that going to impact our financial plan, and to start addressing that within the plan. And the time to do that is way ahead of the situation occurring, not when the situation actually happens.
Right, right. And I love that you shared that this is often what can hold people back. We don't want you to have a just-in-case retirement, right? So many people are scared to spend any money during the go-go years when they can and are able-bodied to go and do the things that they've been wanting to do because they don't know what the cost will be on the back end with some of these long-term care needs potentially.
Yes, and that's just not the best approach. It's not the most efficient approach to this.
Right.
And like I said, too often we find that people, they don't want to deal with this risk, so they tend to push it off and ignore it
Right.
until something actually happens, whether they experience it themselves or it's just a family member or friend. And from my personal experience, I don't think you ever really understand what this looks like until you personally
lived
go
it.
through it with a family member.
Right, yeah.
And from my family perspective, we did have to deal with this. Unfortunately, my father was diagnosed with Parkinson's, and he dealt with that for several years. So when you live through it, you certainly understand some of the challenges, and it's about much more than the money. And that's what we'll kind of transition into here. We'll get to the money side of it, but there's really 4 primary questions that you have to think about as you're doing some planning around this topic. And the first of them is, where do you want your care to be provided? And when you think about that, you have choices on where that care can be provided. You could have care in the home, you could have care in a facility, that could be like an adult daycare type setting, assisted living, skilled nursing, there's all the different levels of that. So where would you prefer for your care to be provided? And when you lay out those choices, with the first choice being in your home, overwhelmingly,
Right.
the
Most
preferred
people-
option
right.
is, I would like to stay in the home for as long as I can. So that's one of the considerations. Where do you want care to be provided? Have that conversation, determine ahead of time where do you want it so that your family can then live out those wishes in the best way possible. So that's question number 1. Question number 2 is, who do you want to provide that care?
Right.
And this is maybe the bigger question. So in a marital situation, sometimes we think, well, my spouse is going to provide that care, or it could be children that are going to provide that care. And I think as a family living through this, I saw kind of the impact of our family trying to be the ones that provide the care.
And there's so much more of an impact than just financial in that realm. It can really take a toll when people.
100%.
Yeah.
So it does a lot of things. So it changes the dynamic of the relationship. So I unfortunately watched my mother and father going from being husband and wife to where my mom was now caregiver, and that is a very different relationship, and it's a hard relationship for the one providing the care. So I watched that because my mom wanted to provide that care for as long as she possibly could. And I think as a family, we all, and most families would be the same way, we want to take care of our loved ones, and we will do whatever we can to take care of our loved ones. But that doesn't necessarily mean that we have to be the ones providing that care. And if we have plans in place, we can bring in outside professionals to provide that care and maintain the relationship of father, son, husband, wife, and provide that love in the relationship without having to be the caregiver.
Right.
Very different role.
Yep.
So 2 primary questions that don't really have a whole lot to do with the financial aspect. It's, where do you want your care to be provided? Who do you want to provide that care? And if you out there are worried about this risk and you're looking to start to have the conversation, you don't really know how to get in the conversation, well, having lived through it, we have a team at our office that knows how to have these conversations and help people navigate through these different difficult conversations. So we can help you through that, but we need you to call to schedule your complimentary consultation to do that.
Kevin, thank you so much. To our viewers at home, that number to call is 866-630-1675. We know that this can be very overwhelming. Let the team of Citizen Advisory Group remove the overwhelm for you. You don't have to go this alone. You're welcome to call that number, or again, you can scan that QR code down in the bottom right-hand corner, and that will get you connected as well. When we come back, Kevin's going to go through the 2 remaining questions of the 4 most important questions you need to ask yourself as it relates to this subject. Stay with us. We'll be back after this.
We know the market is going to get worse from here. This is the biggest monthly decline in 10 years. People's 401ks today.
Well, my investments are tanking. My retirement isn't going as planned. I can't believe I let my kid talk me into buying crypto. I mean, what is that anyway?
This was the 4th worst contraction in history.
So how are you two doing?
Your financial future doesn't have to be uncertain. Plan your retirement right. Call now for your own complimentary portfolio review and tax analysis.
Welcome back to Retire Well, where today we are diving into the important subject of your health care in retirement. Undoubtedly, one of the most important pieces that needs to be in place in order for you to be able to retire well. You know, Kevin, we've been talking about Medicare and kind of we do another entire show on that. There's so much to know about that, but now we're talking about long-term care, and I know you shared that there's 4 questions that people need to ask themselves. We've covered the first 2. Let's move on now to question number 3.
Yeah, so 3 and 4 are the financial side of it, and they're big questions, obviously. So how much is it going to cost? And the reality is you don't really know how much it's going to cost because there's a wide range of different levels of care. So if you are getting care in your home and you only need that 3-4 times a week for a couple hours, well, that's obviously going to be a very different price point than if you are in a skilled nursing setting where you're getting professional services on a regular basis in a skilled nursing setting. So, so cost can vary. So in our area, Northwest Ohio, Southeast Michigan, on the high end, based on today's pricing, you're looking at potentially $10,000 to $11,000 a month in cost on the high end. Now, I shouldn't really call that the high end because memory care, so care for Alzheimer's and dementia, would be a little bit higher price point than that. So cost of care is going to vary.
Right.
The type of care you're getting is really going to determine what that is.
And the length of time that you need it, right?
Yes. So, and when we look at that, we kind of tend to look at, okay, what is the averages? And, you know, I'm not a big fan of averages in most circumstances because I don't really find most people to be average.
Right.
So, but when you look at the average length of a long-term care cost situation is about 2.5 years. So from when we're looking at different solutions on how we're going to pay that, I think we have to kind of look at that as being the good guide that we should expect to be somewhere in the average. You can certainly insure, and I think this is one of the common mistakes we see, is that people try to cover this whole entire risk. So when you're looking at solutions on how you're going to pay this, you have to remember that your income isn't going to just disappear in retirement because you're no longer having to go to work to collect this paycheck. It's likely that you're drawing your Social Security plus potentially a pension and then any investment income that you have. Well, that's not necessarily going to change. So when we're looking at, okay, what is it that we actually have to cover? We're looking at, okay, what's the cost of care minus your current income? And then that's the gap that we need to worry about covering.
Right.
Instead of trying to worry about how to cover that $10,000 to $11,000 expense, because that would be very, very costly, obviously. So we really just need to figure out how to cover the gap because that doesn't disrupt then the financial plan. Because that's what we're trying to accomplish when we're looking at some solutions for this is how do we get some protection in place so that your financial plan is not disrupted, in particular for married couples if there's a surviving spouse.
Right.
So how do we make sure that we haven't just given away all of the assets and income that you have to support what could be a surviving spouse?
Yeah. And that's so important to plan for because, you know, this is just an interesting thing to think through, that previous generations didn't really have to deal with this because people weren't living as long as we are now. But to your point, it's not just planning for your life, it's planning for the lifespan of your spouse as well, and making sure you don't deplete all the assets.
So we've kind of talked about what the costs are, and so how are you going to pay that? So as a financial advisor, that's the conversation we have to have, so that we know if this event happens, how are we going to cover these costs with the least impact to your overall financial plan? So one way of covering that is you just pay for it yourself. So if you have enough retirement savings, you pay for it yourself, and hopefully you don't run out of money before it's too late. But you'll pay for it yourself until you don't have anything left, and that's when the state would step in and you would qualify for some Medicaid benefits. But I don't know that should be the goal.
Right.
That you deplete all your assets and then roll into the state Medicaid program, because one of the things you lose when you go onto Medicaid is control.
Yes, and a lot of those facilities are not the best facilities that you want to be in.
Yeah, so you're giving up control and some of the independence that comes with having the autonomy to make your own decisions.
Right.
So I don't know that is the great goal, but there are certain planning strategies that kind of lead people down that road on how to get to Medicaid qualification sooner. And for some people, maybe that's fine, but I have just found that a lot of people, they don't want to end up in that Medicaid scenario and give up control of how their care is going to be provided to them. So you can self-pay. Maybe you have a family member that's going to pay, but we have to remember that if you're paying or a family member's paying, that we have to pay this with after-tax dollars. So in typical scenario, that means you're drawing out of your IRA and 401k accounts, which are triggering taxes on that. So whatever money I need for my care, I'm also triggering taxes on top of that. So it's actually costing even more than what the cost of care is because of those tax costs. So the third option to that is I look at some type of an insurance solution. There are insurance options out there. The insurance world has evolved over the years, so we need to understand what those choices are and evaluate those choices and see if one of them maybe works for me.
It's so comforting to know that there are solutions, that this is not just a doom and gloom scenario, right? But to your point, the sooner you can start planning, the better off it's going to be.
We have to have the conversation.
Absolutely. Well, Kevin, thank you for having this important conversation on the show today. And to those of you watching, we want you to be able to retire well. If you would like to get some help in this area or any aspect of your financial planning, simply call 866-630-1675. Be safe, be happy, be blessed. We'll see you next time.